My name is Velma, and at 67 years old, I never expected my life would crumble with just 7 words. For 40 years, my son Justin was my pride and joy. After my husband Frank passed 5 years ago, Justin insisted I move in with his family. We were happy, or so I thought. Then one morning I found a note in his handwriting, "Sorry, Mom, no room. We need our space back." I packed my bags in silence, heart shattered into pieces. I had no idea that 73 missed calls would soon reveal a truth that would change everything. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button to join our community of storytellers. Looking back now, I realize how quickly life can change. For over 40 years, Frank and I had built a simple but happy life in Portland, Oregon. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we had a comfortable 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood with a small garden I tended with pride. Frank worked as a high school physics teacher while I was a registered nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center. We saved, carefully paid off our mortgage, and looked forward to a modest but secure retirement. Frank's heart attack 5 years ago came without warning. One minute he was mowing the lawn on a Saturday morning, the next he was clutching his chest and falling to his knees. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. The doctors said it was massive, and there was nothing anyone could have done. Just like that, my partner of 43 years vanished from my life. The house felt enormous without Frank. Every corner held memories that brought both comfort and pain. The creaking step on the staircase that he always promised to fix but never did. The mark on the kitchen wall where he'd measure Justin's height every birthday until he left for college. The garden bench where we'd sit with coffee every morning. It was too much house for just me, and the maintenance was becoming difficult on my own. Justin was always our golden child. From the moment he was born, he seemed destined for success. He was reading by age 4, playing 3 sports by elementary school, and graduated as valedictorian of his high school class. Frank and I couldn't have been prouder when he was accepted to Cornell University on a partial scholarship to study architecture. After college, Justin returned to Portland and quickly established himself at a prestigious architectural firm. By 30, he was already a junior partner. He met Abigail at a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, where she worked in development. They were married within a year and soon started their family. Hannah came first, then Leo, and finally little Samantha. They built a beautiful 5-bedroom house in the West Hills with a stunning view of the city. Justin had achieved everything Frank and I had hoped for him. When Frank died, Justin was my rock. He handled the funeral arrangements, helped me with the insurance paperwork, and checked on me daily. About 6 months after Frank's passing, as I was struggling with home repairs and feeling increasingly isolated, Justin proposed a solution over Sunday dinner. "Mom, we've been talking," he said, glancing at Abigail. "That house is too big for you now, and we have plenty of room here. Why don't you sell your place and move in with us? The kids would love having you around, and it would give you a chance to save some money for the future." Abigail nodded in agreement. "The kids adore you, Velma, and honestly, I could use the help with them. My work schedule is getting more demanding, and having a grandmother in the house would be wonderful." The idea seemed perfect. I could sell the house that was becoming a burden, be closer to my grandchildren, and help the family I loved. Within 2 months, I had sold the house, put most of the furniture in storage, and moved into Justin and Abigail's spacious guest room. The first 6 months were wonderful. I settled into a comfortable routine, taking Hannah, Leo, and Samantha to school in the mornings, preparing dinner for when Justin and Abigail came home from work, and enjoying the bustling energy of a house full of children. I taught Hannah how to bake Frank's favorite chocolate chip cookies. Leo and I built model airplanes in the garage, just like I used to do with Justin. Little Samantha would crawl into my lap each evening for a bedtime story. I felt useful, loved, and part of something bigger than myself again. But subtle changes began to appear. I noticed Abigail becoming more distant, often checking her phone during family dinners or finding reasons to work late. Justin started bringing work home and sequestering himself in his home office immediately after dinner. The children still sought me out, but I could tell they were picking up on the tension. One evening, as I was about to go upstairs with a basket of folded laundry, I overheard Justin and Abigail arguing in their bedroom. "I know she's your mother, but I feel like we never have any privacy anymore," Abigail was saying, her voice strained. "It's like walking on eggshells in our own home." "What am I supposed to do?" Justin responded. "I can't just ask her to leave. She sold her house because of us." I know," Abigail sighed. "I'm not saying that. I didn't realize it would be so intense, having another adult in the house all the time. She has opinions about everything, Justin. How I parent, how I organize the kitchen, what we eat." I backed away quietly, my heart sinking. From that day forward, I tried to make myself less visible. I stopped offering suggestions about the children unless asked directly. I retreated to my room earlier in the evenings. I made sure to give Justin and Abigail space whenever they were both home. But despite my efforts, I could feel myself becoming increasingly unwelcome in what I had begun to think of as my home too. The invisible line between being family and being an intruder grew more defined each day. I remember one Tuesday evening when I prepared a lasagna for dinner using Frank's mother's recipe that Justin had always loved growing up. As we sat down to eat, I noticed Hannah poking at her portion skeptically. "It looks different from how Mom makes it," she said, wrinkling her nose. Before I could respond, Abigail jumped in. "Everyone has different recipes, honey. Just try it." "Actually," I said gently, "this is Grandpa Frank's mother's recipe. Your dad used to request it for his birthday dinner every year." Justin looked up from his plate. "Mom, we're trying to cut down on dairy. Abigail mentioned that to you last week when you bought the ice cream." "Oh," I said, feeling my cheeks flush. "I didn't realize that applied to dinner recipes, too. I'm sorry." "It's fine for tonight," Abigail said with a tight smile. "But maybe check with me about dinner plans going forward. The kids are on a nutrition plan I've worked out with their pediatrician." I nodded, embarrassed and confused. Justin had never mentioned any dietary restrictions, and the children had certainly enjoyed the ice cream I'd bought without complaint. It was the first time I felt directly scolded like a child in front of my own grandchildren. The incidents began to multiply. One Friday evening, I came downstairs, after reading in my room, to find the family setting up for movie night in the living room. Popcorn was being popped, blankets arranged, and the children were excitedly debating which film to watch. "Oh, movie night. What are we watching?" I asked, cheerfully taking a seat on the sofa. An awkward silence fell. Justin and Abigail exchanged glances. "Actually, Mom," Justin said carefully, "we thought you might want some quiet time to yourself. This is kind of a parents and kids tradition." "But Grandma can watch too," Samantha protested, looking confused. "Not tonight, sweetie," Abigail said firmly. "Grandma has her shows she likes to watch upstairs." I didn't have shows. I had never been much of a television watcher, but I understood the message clearly. Rising from the couch with as much dignity as I could muster, I smiled and said, "Of course you all enjoy your family time. I think I'll read a bit more before bed." As I climbed the stairs, I heard Leo ask why I couldn't stay, followed by hushed adult voices. That night, I cried into my pillow for the first time since moving in. Justin's irritability toward me increased, particularly when I interacted with the children. If I helped Hannah with her math homework, he would check it afterward, often redoing problems I had already explained. If I suggested a weekend activity for the kids, he would counter with reasons why my idea wasn't suitable. The spontaneous hugs and warm conversations we once shared became perfunctory greetings and logistical discussions. Abigail became a master of passive-aggressive comments, particularly about space. "The house seemed so much bigger when we first built it," she remarked one day as we passed in the hallway. Another time, while organizing the pantry, she sighed heavily. There just isn't enough storage for everyone's preferences. The most painful blow came 3 months into this growing tension. Justin approached me one evening as I was reading in my room. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," he began, shifting uncomfortably. "Abigail and I have been discussing our work situations, and with both of us taking on more responsibility, we really need a proper home office. This bedroom would be perfect for that since it's away from the kids' rooms and has good natural light." My heart sank. "Oh, I see. And where would I?" "The guest room in the basement is fully finished," he continued quickly. "It has its own bathroom, and you'd have more privacy down there. We could move your things this weekend if that works for you." It wasn't really a question. By Sunday evening, I was settled into the basement guest room. It was clean and reasonably comfortable, but it felt symbolic of my demotion within the household. The basement room was where they put occasional visitors, not family. From my central second-floor bedroom, with its morning light and proximity to the grandchildren, I had been relocated to a space designed for temporary occupancy. Despite the adults' shifting attitudes, my grandchildren still sought me out. Hannah would sneak down to the basement to show me her art projects or talk about school drama away from her parents' ears. Leo still wanted me to watch him practice soccer in the backyard, and little Samantha would still find her way to my new room for bedtime stories, though less frequently, as Abigail began enforcing a stricter bedtime routine. I made several attempts to talk to Justin about the situation. One Sunday afternoon, while Abigail took the children to a birthday party, I approached him in the kitchen. "Justin, do you have a minute to talk?" I asked. He glanced up from his laptop. "Can it wait, Mom? I'm trying to finish this proposal for tomorrow." "I've been trying to find a good time all week," I said. "I just wanted to check in about how things are going with me living here. I sense some tension, and I want to make sure I'm not overstepping." Justin sighed, closing his laptop. "Everything's fine, Mom. We're all just busy and adjusting. Abigail has a lot on her plate with her job and the kids, and I'm up for partner next year, so work is intense. I understand that I said carefully, but I feel like there's more to it. If there are issues with me being here, I'd rather know directly so I can address them." "There's nothing to address," he said, his tone indicating the conversation was over. "We're all just trying to find our rhythm. It takes time when households merge." But time didn't improve things. It only made the division more pronounced. My 67th birthday fell on a Wednesday in April. No one mentioned it at breakfast. I didn't expect a fuss, but in our family, birthdays had always been acknowledged with at least a card and special dinner. By evening, I had resigned myself to a quiet celebration alone, perhaps with a phone call from my sister in Arizona. At dinner, as I served the chicken stir-fry I'd prepared, Hannah suddenly gasped. "Mom, Dad, we forgot it's Grandma's birthday today." Justin and Abigail looked stricken. The children immediately launched into an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday, while Abigail hurriedly whispered to Justin, who disappeared into the garage. He returned with a hastily purchased bouquet of supermarket flowers, still in the plastic wrapper with the price tag visible. "Happy birthday, Mom," Justin said, kissing my cheek. "Sorry for the lack of fanfare. Work has been crazy." "We'll have a proper celebration this weekend," Abigail added, not quite meeting my eyes. But that weekend came and went without mention of my birthday. The flowers wilted on my basement dresser, a perfect metaphor for my place in the household. Increasingly, I found myself considering other living arrangements, but my options were limited by finances. I had sold my house, and while I had some savings and Frank's modest pension, the Portland housing market had skyrocketed. Even a small apartment in a safe neighborhood would stretch my budget thin. And the thought of being completely alone again, away from my grandchildren, was heartbreaking. So I stayed walking on eggshells in a house that grew less welcoming by the day, clinging to the hope that things would eventually improve if I just tried harder to fit in without being noticed. The morning that changed everything started like any other. I woke early, as I always did, from years of nursing shifts, and went upstairs to make coffee for the household. Justin was an early riser too, usually leaving for work by 7, and I knew he appreciated having fresh coffee ready. The kitchen was empty when I entered, but there was a sheet of paper on the counter that hadn't been there when I'd cleaned up after dinner the night before. Assuming it was a shopping list or note from Abigail about the children's activities, I picked it up. The words written in Justin's familiar handwriting hit me like a physical blow. "Sorry, Mom, no room. We need our space back." I had to read it 3 times before the meaning fully registered. My hands began to shake so badly that I had to set the paper down. A pressure built in my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I gripped the counter edge to steady myself, feeling suddenly dizzy. In that moment, memories flooded through me unbidden. Justin at 4 years old, running to me with skinned knees for comfort. At 12, proudly showing me his science fair blue ribbon. At 18, hugging me fiercely before we left him at his college dorm. The day he called to tell me Abigail was pregnant with Hannah, his voice cracking with joy. All the 1,000 moments of unconditional love I had given him throughout his life. And now, at 43, he couldn't even face me directly to ask me to leave. A note. Like I was an unwanted house guest who had overstayed my welcome. I made it back to my basement room before the tears came. They weren't loud, dramatic sobs, but silent rivers that seemed to come from some deep, wounded place I hadn't known existed within me. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, trying to process what I needed to do next. A strange calm descended as shock gave way to resolve. If I wasn't wanted, I wouldn't stay where I wasn't welcome. I would leave with what dignity I had left. I began packing methodically. 2 suitcases and a duffel bag would hold the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, medications, photo albums, and a few treasured mementos from Frank that I had kept with me rather than placing in storage. I worked silently, efficiently, as I had done countless times preparing patients for discharge at the hospital. The family had already left for the day. Justin to work. Abigail dropping the children at school before heading to her office. I was alone with my thoughts and the echo of that terse note. As I folded sweaters and arranged them in my suitcase, tears would occasionally fall onto the fabric. I didn't bother wiping them away. They were part of this process, too, this unexpected ending of a chapter I had thought would be much longer. I didn't call Justin or Abigail. What was there to say that the note hadn't already made clear? I couldn't bear to hear Justin try to soften the blow, or worse, confirm that my presence had become a burden they no longer wished to carry. And I certainly didn't want to put the children in the middle of an adult situation they couldn't fully understand. Instead, I wrote my own note, placing it on the kitchen counter where mine had been found. "I received your note and understand. Thank you for the time I've had with you all. I'll be staying with Diana for now. Please don't worry about me. Love, Mom. Short, dignified, and without recrimination. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how deeply they had wounded me. Diana was my oldest friend from nursing school now, a widow like me, living in a small two-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. We spoke weekly but hadn't seen each other as often since I moved in with Justin. I called her from my cell phone as I finished packing. Diana, it's Velma. I hate to impose, but I find myself in need of a place to stay for a little while. Would it be possible? Velma, you know you never need to ask, Diana interrupted. What's happened? Are you all right? I'll explain when I see you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll be there in about an hour if that works for you. I'll put the kettle on, she replied, concern evident in her voice. I made one final sweep of my basement room, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything essential. Most of my possessions were still in the storage unit I'd rented after selling the house. That was a blessing now. I wouldn't have to coordinate moving furniture or large items. The drive to Diana's apartment was a blur. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, focusing intently on traffic signals and turn lanes to keep my mind from spiraling into the hurt and betrayal that lurked just below my carefully maintained composure. Diana was waiting at the door. When I arrived, her kind face creased with worry. One look at me with my suitcases and red-rimmed eyes told her this was serious. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug as soon as I crossed the threshold. "What on earth has happened?" The simple act of compassion nearly broke my composure. I took a deep breath, set down my bags, and followed her to her small kitchen, where 2 mugs of tea waited. "Justin left me a note this morning," I said, my voice catching despite my best efforts. It said, "Sorry, Mom, no room. We need our space back." Diana's expression transformed from concern to outrage. "He did what a note? After you sold your house to move in with them? After all you've done for those children?" I found myself in the strange position of defending Justin, even as my heart ached with his rejection. He and Abigail have been under a lot of pressure. 2 careers, 3 children. I'm sure they didn't mean to be cruel. "Velma Meredith Gardner," Diana said sternly, using my full name as she had when we were young nurses together. "Don't you dare make excuses for that kind of behavior. What that boy did was inexcusable, note or no note. There are ways to have difficult conversations with people you love, and that wasn't it." Deep down, I knew she was right, but acknowledging the full extent of Justin's callousness meant facing the depth of my own pain, and I wasn't ready for that yet. That evening, after Diana had set me up in her spare bedroom with fresh linens and a promise that I could stay as long as needed, I made a decision. I turned off my cell phone. I couldn't bear to see Justin's name appear on my screen, couldn't stomach whatever justification or half-hearted apology he might offer. In the quiet of Diana's guest room, surrounded by borrowed space and the faint scent of unfamiliar laundry detergent, I made another decision as well. At 67 years old, I would start over. Not just temporarily, but permanently. I would not put myself in a position to be discarded again. The next morning, I called the storage facility where my furniture and household goods were kept. I arranged for a meeting with a consignment shop owner who might be interested in purchasing the larger pieces. Then I contacted a realtor about the possibility of selling my portion of the house that Justin and I still co-owned from my parents' estate, a small rental property we had inherited and managed together. "Are you sure about this?" Diana asked, as I ended the call with the realtor. "These are big decisions to make when you're hurting." "I've never been more sure," I replied. "It's time I created my own security, instead of relying on family who see me as disposable. Over the next few days, I threw myself into rebuilding my life from scratch. I searched online for affordable senior apartments, made appointments to view several options, and began the process of downsizing even further by sorting through what few possessions I had brought with me. My phone remained off. Whatever Justin had to say could wait until I was standing on firmer ground emotionally and practically. First, I needed to know I would be okay on my own. That first week at Diana's passed in a blur of activity and numbness. Despite Diana's best efforts to ensure I ate properly, food held little appeal. I would pick at the meals she prepared, managing a few bites to be polite before claiming fullness. Sleep proved equally elusive. I would lie awake in her guest bedroom, replaying moments from the past year, searching for signs I had missed, wondering what I could have done differently. Diana, bless her heart, knew exactly what I needed. She didn't push me to talk when I fell silent, didn't offer platitudes about time healing all wounds. Instead, she helped me create a concrete plan for independence. "You need your own place," she said firmly over morning coffee, about a week after I arrived. "Somewhere that's yours alone, where no one can ask you to leave." Together we pored over listings for senior communities in the Portland area. Many were beyond my budget, especially with the uncertainty about selling the rental property that Justin and I co-owned. But eventually we found a modest one-bedroom apartment in a pleasant complex called Riverside Gardens, about 15 minutes from Diana's place. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, had a small patio where I could put some potted plants, and included utilities and basic cable in the rent. "It's perfect," I said after we toured the unit. "I can afford it with my Social Security and pension, even without selling anything. And it's got a spare sleeper sofa for when I come over for our wine and gossip nights," Diana added with a wink. Using some of my savings, I furnished the apartment minimally but comfortably. A second-hand bedroom set a small dining table with 2 chairs, a comfortable recliner for reading, and a few essential kitchen items. It wasn't the home I had shared with Frank for 40 years, nor was it the luxurious house where my grandchildren lived, but it was mine. No one could write me a note asking me to leave. Moving into Riverside Gardens introduced me to a community of people in similar life situations. My next-door neighbor Alice had moved there after her husband's death 3 years earlier. Across the hall, Thomas and his wife Barbara had downsized from their family home when maintaining it became too much for them. At the weekly coffee social in the community room, I met Dorothy, who had relocated to be near her daughter but wanted her own independent space. "Family is wonderful," Dorothy told me, "but boundaries are essential at our age. We've earned the right to our own routines and preferences." I found myself nodding in agreement, though I didn't share the full circumstances of my own situation. The wound was still too raw, the humiliation too fresh. To keep myself busy and supplement my income, I registered with a healthcare staffing agency that placed retired nurses in part-time positions. Within 2 weeks, I was volunteering 20 hours a week at a community health clinic, helping with intake assessments and patient education. The familiar rhythm of healthcare work was soothing, and the gratitude of patients who benefited from my decades of experience gave me a sense of purpose that had been missing. Despite my efforts to move forward, the resentment toward Justin grew rather than diminished. In quiet moments, the hurt would wash over me anew. How could my own child, whom I had loved and supported, unconditionally discard me so casually, a lifetime of nurturing, reduced to a 7-word note on a kitchen counter? Diana noticed my darkening mood. "Have you considered talking to someone professional about this?" she suggested gently. "There's no shame in getting help processing something this painful." "I'm fine," I insisted, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. I just need time and distance. 3 weeks after leaving Justin's home, I made an appointment with an attorney to discuss my options regarding the rental property we co-owned. It was a small 2-bedroom bungalow that had belonged to my parents, left equally to me and Justin in their will. We had been renting it out for years, splitting the modest income it generated. The attorney, a straightforward woman named Patricia, laid out my options clearly. You can either buy out your son's half, sell him your half, or put the property on the market and split the proceeds. Given my financial situation and the Portland real estate market, only the third option made sense. How do we proceed with that? I asked. I'll draw up the paperwork and send it to your son for his signature, Patricia explained. If he agrees to the sale, we can list the property immediately. If not, we may need to go through a partition action, though that's rarely necessary with family properties. The thought of forcing Justin into a legal battle made me uncomfortable, but the practical need for financial security overrode my hesitation. Let's proceed with the paperwork for a voluntary sale, I decided. I can't imagine he'd object given the circumstances. That afternoon, I took a significant step in reclaiming my independence. I contacted a real estate agent and initiated the process of listing the family home for sale. The decision wasn't made out of spite, though. I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction in exercising this right without consulting Justin. It was a practical necessity for my financial future. The realtor, an energetic woman named Brenda, was surprised when I explained that I wanted to proceed without notifying my co-owner yet. Usually both parties are involved from the beginning, she noted. My son and I are not in communication at present, I explained carefully, but he'll be informed through proper legal channels before anything is finalized. Brenda looked skeptical, but agreed to move forward. We scheduled a property assessment for the following week and discussed potential listing prices based on the current market. As I drove back to my apartment from the realtor's office, I felt a strange mix of empowerment and sadness. This concrete step toward financial independence was necessary, but it also represented another severing of ties with Justin. The rental property had been one of the few remaining connections we shared, a legacy from my parents that we had managed together over the years. The stress of the situation began to manifest physically. I lost 7 pounds in those first 3 weeks, weight I couldn't afford to lose from my already slender frame. Sleep remained elusive, and when I did manage to doze off, I would wake from dreams of being locked out of houses, searching for keys that didn't exist. Dark circles formed under my eyes, and my hands developed a slight tremor that I hadn't had before. Diana, ever watchful, noticed these changes with growing concern. "Velma, this can't continue," she said firmly, after I declined dinner for the 3rd night in a row. "You haven't checked your phone in nearly 3 weeks. Whatever is waiting there can't be worse than this limbo you've put yourself in." "I'm not ready to hear his excuses," I protested weakly. "Then don't call him back," she reasoned. "But at least check if he's reached out, for your own peace of mind if nothing else." Reluctantly, I agreed she had a point. That evening, sitting in Diana's living room with her supportive presence nearby, I finally turned on my cell phone. It took several minutes to power up after being off for so long, and then the notifications began to flood in. 73 missed calls, 42 voicemails, 38 text messages. I stared at the screen in disbelief. 73 calls, I whispered. Most were from Justin, but there were also calls from Abigail, and even a few from Hannah's phone. The volume and frequency suggested an urgency I hadn't anticipated. Whatever response I had expected to my departure, this desperate barrage, wasn't it? With trembling fingers, I opened the voicemail app and put the phone on speaker so Diana could hear too, starting with the earliest messages from the day I left. The first few were what I had expected, confusion, then irritation, then concern. "Mom, where are you? Call me. Mom, what's going on? Why did you leave a note? Please call me back. Mom, I'm getting worried. No one knows where you are except that you're with Diana. Please call me." As the days progressed, the messages became increasingly desperate. "Mom, please, whatever I did, we can talk about it. Just call me back. Mom, the kids are asking for you. They don't understand why you left. Please just let us know you're okay. Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Did I do something? Whatever it is, I'm sorry. Please call me." Abigail's messages were equally concerned. "Velma, we're all very worried about you. Justin is beside himself. Please call us back. Velma, if this is about something in the house, we can work it out. The children miss you terribly. Please contact us." Even Hannah had left a tearful message. "Grandma, why did you go away? Leo is really sick, and Mom and Dad are really scared, and they need you to come back. Please come home." It was the final voicemail, left just 2 days earlier, that made me freeze in place. Justin's voice, normally so controlled and confident, was broken with sobs. "Mom, I don't know if you're getting these messages, but I need you. Leo has leukemia. We found out last week and we're all falling apart. I know I've been awful to you and I don't deserve your help, but please. Leo keeps asking for his grandma. Please call me back." I felt the blood drain from my face. Leo. My sweet, energetic 12-year-old grandson. Leukemia. Diana's hand found mine and squeezed tightly. "Oh, Velma," she whispered. In that moment, all the hurt and resentment I had been nursing became secondary to a much more urgent concern. Whatever had happened between Justin and me, whatever note had been written or not written, a child was in crisis. My grandson needed me. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, I pressed the call button next to Justin's name. Justin answered on the first ring, as though he had been sitting with the phone in his hand. "Mom." His voice was rough, hoarse from what sounded like days of crying. "Is that really you?" "It's me," I confirmed, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I just heard your messages about Leo. What's happening?" There was a moment of silence, then a sound that might have been a suppressed sob. "You didn't get any of my calls until now." "I turned my phone off," I admitted. "I just turned it back on a few minutes ago." "Mom, I've been trying to reach you for weeks," he said, his voice cracking. "We've been frantic. I even went to Diana's building, but no one would tell me which apartment was hers, and she wouldn't answer her door." I glanced at Diana, who looked slightly guilty. "I saw him through the peephole," she admitted in a whisper. "I thought you weren't ready to see him yet." "Justin, tell me about Leo." I pressed, needing to focus on the most critical issue first. What followed was a story that left me reeling. Leo had been experiencing fatigue and unusual bruising for several weeks. Initially, they thought it was related to his soccer activities, but when he developed a persistent fever and complained of bone pain, they took him to the pediatrician. Blood tests revealed abnormalities that led to an immediate referral to a pediatric oncologist. They diagnosed him with acute lymphoblastic leukemia the day before you found that note. Justin explained, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "The one on the kitchen counter." "What do you mean the day before?" I asked, confused. "You wrote the note." "Mom, I wrote that note weeks earlier," Justin interrupted, "during an argument with Abigail. She was stressed about work and the kids, and said something about needing more space. I was frustrated and scribbled that note, but I never meant for you to see it. I put it in my desk drawer because I felt ashamed as soon as I wrote it." My mind struggled to process this information. But then, how did it end up on the counter that morning? Justin's explanation came in a rush of words, as though he had been waiting weeks to tell me this story. Leo was diagnosed, and everything happened so fast. He was admitted to the hospital immediately for tests and to start treatment. Abigail and I were taking turns staying with him while the other came home for the girls. I was cleaning out my desk to make a folder for all of Leo's medical information, and I must have accidentally mixed that old note in with papers I brought to the kitchen. I never intended for you to see it, Mom. I was going to talk to you about our living situation eventually, but in a real conversation, not like that. The revelation left me speechless. The note that had shattered my world and sent me fleeing from my family had never been meant for me to find. A cruel coincidence, a terrible timing of events. When we came home and found your note saying you understood and were going to Diana's, we were confused, Justin continued. Then I saw my note on the counter and realized what had happened. I tried calling you immediately, but you never answered. Diana wouldn't even confirm if you were staying with her. I needed space to process, I said quietly, still trying to absorb everything. I thought you had deliberately left that note for me to find. Mom, I would never. His voice broke. I've been a terrible son these past months. I know that. Things were tense, and I didn't handle it well. But I would never just leave you a note asking you to leave. Never. The pain in his voice seemed genuine, but the hurt of the past months couldn't be erased by a single explanation. Justin, even if the note wasn't meant for me to find right then, you still wrote those words. You still felt that way. I did for a moment during a fight with Abigail, he admitted. But it wasn't a true reflection of how I feel about you, Mom. It was a moment of frustration that I'm deeply ashamed of. And now, with Leo sick, we need you more than ever. Not just for practical help, but because you're family. Leo keeps asking for you. He doesn't understand why his grandmother disappeared right when he got sick. The mention of Leo's confusion sent a pang through my heart. Whatever my issues with Justin and Abigail, my grandson, was innocent in all this, and now he was facing the battle of his young life. Which hospital is he in? I asked, decision made. Providence Children's, Justin replied, hope entering his voice for the first time. He's starting his second round of chemo tomorrow. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said firmly. After ending the call, I turned to Diana, who had heard the entire conversation. You need to go, she said before I could speak. That boy needs his grandmother. I'm still angry, I admitted. The situation with Justin and Abigail isn't resolved just because of this emergency. Of course not, Diana agreed. But right now, Leo is what matters. You can sort out the rest later. The drive to Providence Children's Hospital gave me time to process the whirlwind of information. The note that had seemed so deliberate, so final, had never been intended for me to find. It still hurt that Justin had written those words at all, but the context changed my understanding of the situation significantly. Arriving at the pediatric oncology ward, I steeled myself for whatever I might find. The nurse at the station directed me to room 412, mentioning that Leo's mother was currently with him. I paused outside the door, taking a deep breath before knocking softly and pushing it open. The sight inside made my heart constrict. Leo, my energetic, sports-loving grandson, lay in the hospital bed looking pale and much smaller than his 12 years. His thick brown hair was already thinning from the chemotherapy. Abigail sat beside him, reading aloud from a fantasy novel, her own face drawn with exhaustion. Leo spotted me first. "Grandma," he exclaimed, his voice weaker, but eyes lighting up. "You came back." Abigail's head whipped around her expression, transforming from shock to relief to something more complicated. She stood quickly, the book falling to the floor, forgotten. "Velma," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank God. I moved to Leo's bedside, taking his hand in mine. It felt small and fragile with an IV line taped to the back. Of course I came back. I told him, forcing a brightness into my voice that I didn't entirely feel. I just had some things to take care of. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Leo's eyes, so like his father's, studied my face. Dad said you were helping other sick people at another hospital, he said. But I needed you here. The white lie Justin had told to explain my absence touched me unexpectedly. He hadn't vilified me to the children, despite everything. Well, now I'm here to help you, I assured him, smoothing a hand over his thinning hair. Your grandma was a nurse for 40 years, you know. I know all the secret tricks to making hospitals less awful. A ghost of Leo's usual cheeky smile appeared. Like what? Like knowing which nurses will sneak you popsicles after hours and how to make the IV pole stop beeping for no reason, I said, falling easily into the familiar role of caregiver. Abigail touched my shoulder tentatively. Velma, could we talk in the hallway for a minute? She asked quietly. I nodded, telling Leo I'd be right back. Once in the corridor, Abigail surprised me by pulling me into a fierce hug. I'm so sorry, she whispered, for everything. The way we treated you, the tension in the house. And then for you to find that horrible note. I stood stiffly in her embrace, not quite ready to reciprocate. Justin explained about the note, I said, that it wasn't meant for me to find right then. Abigail pulled back, wiping at her eyes. He wrote it after a fight we had. I was stressed about work and the kids, and I said something awful about needing our space back. I didn't mean it, not really. And as soon as I saw that he'd written that note, I told him to throw it away. I never thought you'd find it. Her explanation matched Justin's, which lent credibility to the story, but it didn't erase the underlying issue. So you did feel that way, though, both of you. Abigail looked down, shame evident in her posture. Sometimes, yes, she admitted. Not because of anything you did wrong, Velma. It was my own inadequacy. I felt like you were a better mother to my children than I was. You were always so patient, so knowledgeable. The kids would go to you first with problems or questions. I was jealous, and instead of talking about it, I let it fester. Her honesty was disarming. Before I could formulate a response, she continued, and then Leo got sick, and suddenly none of that mattered anymore. All that petty jealousy and territorialism seemed so ridiculous in the face of possibly losing our son. And you weren't there when we needed you most. I didn't know, I said softly. I turned off my phone. I couldn't bear to hear excuses for that note. I understand, Abigail said. I probably would have done the same. But now that you're here, she hesitated. Velma, we got a call from a real estate agent yesterday about the house being listed for sale. Is that true? The question caught me off guard. In the shock of learning about Leo's condition, I had completely forgotten about my meeting with the realtor. Yes, I admitted. I needed financial security, and selling my portion of the rental property seemed the most logical step. Justin was devastated, Abigail said quietly. Not because of the money, but because he saw it, as you cutting the final tie between you. He's been beside himself with guilt over that note, and then to get that call. I felt a twinge of regret for not discussing the sale with Justin first, but quickly reminded myself that I had been operating under the belief that he wanted me out of his life. I made the best decision I could with the information I had at the time, I said firmly. Abigail nodded. Of course, I'm not judging you, Velma. I just wanted you to know where things stand. She glanced back toward Leo's room. He'll be so much better now that you're here. He's been asking for you constantly. As we returned to Leo's room, I felt the weight of conflicting emotions, concern for my grandson lingering hurt over the past months, confusion about the misunderstanding, with the note and uncertainty about what would happen next. But one thing was clear. For now, Leo's health took precedence over everything else. Over the next few days, I practically lived at the hospital. The small family room at the end of the pediatric oncology ward became my temporary home, with its uncomfortable pull-out sofa and tiny bathroom. Justin and Abigail were initially surprised when I announced I would be staying overnight, but the relief in their eyes was unmistakable. "You should go home and be with the girls," I told them on my first evening there. "I've got the nursing experience to keep an eye on things here, and you two look exhausted." "Are you sure, Mom?" Justin asked, dark circles under his eyes testifying to the sleepless nights he'd endured. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Leo and I will have a movie marathon, and I'll call you immediately if anything changes." The truth was, being with Leo gave me purpose and allowed me to delay the inevitable difficult conversations with Justin and Abigail. In the hospital, we all had a common focus that transcended the tension of our unresolved family dynamics. My nursing background proved invaluable during those long days and nights. I quickly established relationships with Leo's care team, asking informed questions about his treatment protocol and advocating for better pain management when I noticed signs of discomfort he wasn't verbalizing. "You're the most knowledgeable family member we've worked with in a while, Doctor," Patel, Leo's oncologist, commented after I suggested a specific anti-nausea medication that might work better with Leo's particular symptoms. 40 years of nursing," I replied simply. "You pick up a few things." Leo's treatment was intense, but showing promising initial results. The particular type of leukemia he had been diagnosed with, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, had a relatively good prognosis with prompt treatment, which was a small mercy in an otherwise overwhelming situation. Despite the medical encouragement, tension remained thick between me, Justin, and Abigail. We were polite, focused on Leo, but the underlying issues simmered below the surface. We carefully avoided discussing my abrupt departure or the note that had precipitated it, creating an artificial bubble of cooperation that we all knew would eventually burst. The crisis came on the 10th night of my hospital vigil. Leo had been particularly uncomfortable that day, the cumulative effects of chemotherapy making him nauseated and irritable. He had finally fallen into a restless sleep around 10 p.m., and I was dozing in the recliner beside his bed when the monitors began to alarm. Leo's temperature had spiked dramatically, and his blood pressure was dropping. Classic signs of sepsis, a life-threatening complication that cancer patients with compromised immune systems are particularly vulnerable to. I hit the call button and immediately began my own assessment, falling back on decades of nursing instinct. "Leo, honey, wake up," I called, gently shaking his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever. "Grandma, I don't feel good," he mumbled. "I know, sweetheart. The nurses are coming to help," I assured him, while mentally cataloging his symptoms with growing concern. When the night nurse entered, I switched to professional mode. Temperature 103.8 and rising BP 82 over 40, heart rate 135. He's neutropenic from the chemo, and I'm concerned about septic shock. We need Dr. Patel and broad-spectrum antibiotics stat. The nurse, momentarily taken aback by my command of medical terminology, quickly assessed the situation herself and reached for the phone. Calling a rapid response, she confirmed. Within minutes, the room filled with the rapid response team. I stepped back to give them space to work, but continued providing relevant information. He had his central line accessed for chemo earlier today. That could be the infection source. Dr. Patel arrived as they were starting the antibiotics. "Mrs. Gardner, good catch," he said tersely as he examined Leo. "With neutropenic sepsis, every minute counts." I called Justin and Abigail, who arrived in a panic 20 minutes later to find the crisis stabilizing. Leo had been moved to the PICU for closer monitoring, but the prompt intervention had likely prevented a far worse outcome. "What happened?" Justin demanded, his face ashen, as he looked at his son connected to even more machines than before. Dr. Patel explained the situation clinically, concluding with, "Your mother's quick action and medical knowledge made a critical difference tonight. She recognized the signs of sepsis immediately and ensured we started treatment without delay." Justin and Abigail turned to me with identical expressions of stunned gratitude. For the first time since I'd returned, Abigail reached for my hand and held it tightly without self-consciousness or hesitation. We spent that night huddled together in the PICU waiting room. The veneer of polite distance finally cracked by the shared terror of nearly losing Leo. Around 3 in the morning, when Abigail had finally succumbed to exhaustion on one of the small couches, Justin approached me with 2 cups of vending machine coffee. "Here," he said, handing me one. "It's terrible, but it's hot." "Thanks," I replied, accepting the peace offering for what it was. Justin sat beside me, staring into his coffee, as if it might contain answers to questions he hadn't yet figured out how to ask. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, I owe you an explanation and an apology. A big one." I turned to look at him, really look at him for the first time since returning. My golden boy looked older than his 43 years in that moment. The strain of the past weeks etched into lines I hadn't noticed before. "Yes," I agreed simply. "You do." Justin took a deep breath. That note. I wrote it one night after a fight with Abigail. She was stressed about work. The kids were acting up, and she said something about how everything was easier before you moved in. I was angry, not at you, but at the situation. I scribbled that note as a way to vent, but I immediately regretted it and stuck it in my desk drawer. "But you did feel that way," I said, echoing what I had said to Abigail days earlier, even momentarily, after I sold my house to move in with you at your suggestion. Justin winced. "I felt overwhelmed," he admitted. "Not because of anything you did wrong, but because I was trying to be everything to everyone. Good son to you, supportive husband, to Abigail, present father to the kids, and partner track at the firm. I was failing at all of it, and it was easier to focus frustration externally than admit I couldn't handle it all." His honesty was refreshing, but it didn't erase the hurt. "You could have talked to me, Justin. Instead, you let me feel increasingly unwelcome in subtle ways for months. The basement room, the exclusion from family activities, the forgotten birthday." Justin's head dropped in shame. "I know. I handled it all wrong. I kept telling myself we'd have a real conversation about living arrangements once things settled down at work, but I never made it a priority." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and emotion. "And then Leo got sick, and you were gone, and I realized how badly I'd messed up. How much we all need you. Need me, or need my nursing experience." I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since returning. Both Justin admitted with painful honesty. At first, when we couldn't find you, it was panic about Leo, and knowing your medical background would help. But as days passed, and you were still gone, it was more than that. The girls were crying for their grandmother. I was lost without my mom. Our family had a Velma-shaped hole that nothing else could fill. The rawness in his voice suggested sincerity, But I had been hurt too deeply to accept easy reconciliation. And yet you wrote that note. You moved me to the basement. Your wife resented my presence. Yes, Justin acknowledged, and I can't undo any of that. All I can do is tell you how sorry I am and that losing you these past weeks showed me exactly what I had been taking for granted. We sat in silence for several minutes, the hushed sounds of the hospital at night surrounding us. Finally, I spoke. When I found that note, Justin, it broke something in me. Not just because of the words themselves, but because it seemed to confirm what I had been feeling for months, that I was an unwanted burden in your home. You were never a burden, Justin insisted. Never. We didn't know how to navigate having another adult in our household dynamic. Instead of addressing it maturely, we let resentments build. That's why I decided to establish my own home, I explained. Not out of anger, though I was certainly hurt, but because I realized I needed my own space where my presence wasn't contingent on someone else's convenience. Justin nodded slowly. That makes sense. And maybe that's actually the healthier arrangement for everyone. He hesitated before adding, "We heard from the realtor about the house listing. I should have discussed it with you first," I conceded, "but I wasn't exactly in a place to consider your feelings at the time." "I understand," Justin said. "And honestly, selling might be the right move anyway. We can use my portion to help with Leo's medical expenses that insurance doesn't cover." Our conversation was interrupted by a nurse coming to update us on Leo's condition. His fever was responding to the antibiotics, and his blood pressure had stabilized. The immediate crisis was passing. Later that day, as Leo's condition continued to improve, the hospital social workers suggested a family meeting. "This kind of medical crisis puts enormous strain on families," she explained. "Sometimes having a neutral space to discuss concerns can be helpful." To my surprise, both Justin and Abigail readily agreed. That afternoon, while Leo was sleeping under the watchful eye of his PICU nurse, we gathered in a small conference room with Dr. Sarah Klein, the hospital's family support social worker. "Let's start by acknowledging that you've all been through an extremely stressful experience," Dr. Klein began. "Velma, I understand you were estranged from the family briefly before Leo's diagnosis." The direct question opened the floodgates. For the next hour, we engaged in the most honest conversation we'd had as a family in years. I expressed my hurt over the note and the months of feeling increasingly unwelcome. Justin and Abigail acknowledged their poor handling of the living situation. Abigail admitted her jealousy over my bond with the children. "I felt like I was competing with the perfect grandmother," she confessed. "The kids would come to you with problems before they'd come to me. You always knew exactly what to say and do. That comes with 40 years of parenting and nursing experience," I pointed out. "It wasn't a competition, Abigail. I was trying to help, not replace you." "I know that now," she said. "It took almost losing you completely to realize how childish I was being." Dr. Klein guided us toward practical solutions rather than just emotional catharsis. "It sounds like the living arrangement wasn't working for anyone despite good intentions. Velma, you've established your own home now." "Yes, a small apartment in a senior community," I confirmed. "And how do you feel about that space?" "I like it," I admitted. "It's mine. I can arrange it how I want, keep my own schedule. But I miss my family, especially the children." "What if Dr. Klein suggested you maintained your independent living space but established regular planned family time? Many families find that clearer boundaries actually enhance relationships rather than diminishing them." By the end of the session, we had outlined a potential path forward. I would keep my apartment, but we would have scheduled family dinners twice a week. I would help with the children after school 3 days a week, while Justin and Abigail were at work. Most importantly, we committed to open communication about expectations and boundaries. As we prepared to return to Leo's bedside, I made one thing very clear. I forgive you both because life is too short, and Leo's illness has put everything in perspective. But I won't be taken for granted again. I won't be made to feel like an unwelcome guest in your lives. Justin and Abigail both nodded solemnly. We understand, Justin said, and we don't deserve your forgiveness, but we're grateful for it. As we stood to leave the conference room, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The hurt wasn't completely healed, and trust would take time to rebuild, but we had taken the first crucial steps toward a healthier family dynamic. And most importantly, Leo was beginning to improve down the hall, fighting his battle with the full support of a family that was learning to fight for each other too. 6 months passed in a blur of hospital visits, treatment milestones, and gradually rebuilding family bonds. Through it all, I maintained my independence while finding new ways to be present for my family. The most joyous day came in late autumn when Dr. Patel delivered the news we had been desperately hoping for. Leo was officially in remission. The aggressive treatment protocol had worked, though he would need maintenance therapy and close monitoring for years to come. I can go back to soccer, Leo asked immediately, his priority clear, despite all he had been through. Dr. Patel smiled. Not quite yet, but eventually, yes. You've been an incredibly brave patient, Leo. I had good help, Leo replied, squeezing my hand where I sat beside his hospital bed. Throughout his treatment, I had been his constant advocate, using my nursing knowledge to explain procedures, manage side effects, and ensure his care team had all the information they needed. My apartment at Riverside Gardens had become my sanctuary during those intense months. After long days at the hospital, I would return to my own quiet space, tend to my growing collection of houseplants on the small patio, and recharge for the challenges ahead. The proceeds from selling the rental property had provided a financial cushion that allowed me to focus on family needs without worrying about my own security. True to our agreement, I joined the family for dinner every Tuesday and Saturday. Those gatherings evolved from initially awkward affairs to genuinely warm family time. Hannah, now 16, would save her school art projects to show me. Samantha, at 9, would climb into my lap, just like before. And Leo, when his strength returned enough for home visits, would sit close beside me, our bond strengthened by the hours spent together during his treatment. Justin and Abigail had changed, too. Their marriage, tested by the crucible of a child's serious illness, emerged stronger. They learned to communicate more openly, not just with me, but with each other. The near loss of both Leo and their relationship with me had put their priorities into sharp perspective. My volunteer work at the hospital expanded in an unexpected direction. After witnessing my effectiveness in supporting Leo, the pediatric oncology department asked if I would consider establishing a support program for grandparents of pediatric cancer patients. Many grandparents feel doubly helpless, the department head explained. They're watching both their grandchild suffer and their own child struggle as a parent. Your perspective and experience would be invaluable. This new role gave me purpose beyond family obligations. Twice weekly, I led support groups where grandparents could share their fears, learn how to effectively support their families, and find community among others facing similar challenges. The work was emotionally demanding, but deeply fulfilling. My social circle widened as well. I maintained my friendship with Diana, who had been my rock during the darkest period. But I also developed new friendships at Riverside Gardens, particularly with Alice next door and a retired literature professor named Howard, who shared my love of mystery novels. One Saturday in spring, the family gathered for what Justin had dubbed Leo's remission celebration. The backyard was decorated with streamers and balloons, and Leo's friends from school came bearing gifts and eager to see their classmate who had been absent for so long. As I watched Leo laughing with his friends, his hair beginning to grow back in soft tufts, I felt Justin approach and stand beside me. "Penny, for your thoughts, Mom," he asked. "Just marveling at resilience," I replied. "Leo's, yes, but all of ours, really." Justin nodded, following my gaze to his son. "I've been thinking a lot about love lately," he said after a moment. "How we assume it's unconditional, especially in families, but how easily we can take it for granted. Love might be unconditional," I mused, "but relationships require maintenance and respect. I think we all learned that the hard way. I wish it hadn't taken nearly losing you and Leo to teach us that lesson," Justin said quietly. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "The important thing is that we learned it." Later that evening, after the guests had left and the younger children were in bed, Justin called for everyone's attention. Leo, Abigail, Hannah, and I gathered in the living room, curious about the unexpected family meeting. I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge something important. Justin began, his voice thick with emotion. "This past year has tested us in ways I never could have imagined. Leo's illness was the most visible challenge, but it wasn't the only one." He turned to face me directly. "Mom, when you left after finding that note, it created a hole in our family that nothing could fill. Even before Leo got sick, we realized how much we had taken you for granted. And then when he needed you most, when we all needed you most, you came back, despite how deeply we had hurt you." Abigail joined in, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Velma, your forgiveness taught us what real love looks like. Not the convenient kind that's easy when everything is going well, but the kind that shows up when it's hard, when boundaries have been violated, when trust needs rebuilding." To my surprise, Hannah spoke up next. "Grandma, I was so angry when you left because I didn't understand why. Then when Leo got sick and you came back to help him, I realized what real strength looks like. You showed me that standing up for yourself and still being there for family aren't opposite things." Leo, still thin, but with color returning to his cheeks, added simply, "You saved my life, Grandma. Not just with the medical stuff, but by being there every day telling me I could beat this." I hadn't expected this outpouring and found myself blinking back tears. "Family is complicated," I said finally. "At 67, I had to learn that loving you all didn't mean sacrificing my own needs and dignity, and that establishing boundaries wasn't about pushing you away, but about creating a healthier relationship for all of us." "We're better for it," Justin affirmed, "all of us, which is why we wanted to give you this." He handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with 5 charms, one for each family member. "We want you to wear this as a reminder that you're an essential part of this family," Justin explained. "Not living under our roof doesn't make you any less central to who we are." The gesture touched me deeply. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist where it caught the light from the nearby lamp. "Thank you," I said, simply knowing. They understood the depth of feeling behind those 2 words. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the devastating discovery of that note to tonight's affirming celebration, we had traversed territory I never expected to face in my later years. The painful gift of that time was learning at 67 that self-respect isn't selfish, that sometimes stepping back allows others to recognize your value. That forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, but rather building something new on a foundation of hard-earned wisdom. In losing what I thought was my only option, living with my son's family, I had gained something far more precious, a balanced relationship based on mutual respect rather than dependency or obligation. In establishing my own independent life, I had become more, not less, to the people I loved most. The bracelet on my wrist jingled softly as I turned the steering wheel toward home, my home, where I would sleep soundly in a space that was entirely mine, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow and all the days after I would be welcomed by my family not out of duty, but out of genuine love and appreciation. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members you love? What did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of family forgiveness and finding strength at any age resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of life's unexpected journeys. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to teach others how to treat you with the respect you deserve. Until next time, this is Velma, wishing you courage on your own path to healing.